Okay.
Morning, everybody.
Nice jumper, Councillor Andrew.
Goodness, trying to get into the Christmas spirit.
You cheered up on Monday morning. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sure.
Recording in progress.
Okay.
We'll get the Christmas float out
Everybody.
later on, so it'll real to me, wouldn't it?
Good morning. Good morning, Corridor. My name is Councillor Cheryl Carlisle, and I am the Chair of the Finance and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Can I welcome everyone to the meeting, which is a multi-location meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the Council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available, and for those attending remotely to choose your language of choice. For those wishing to speak in the chamber, please raise your hand. For those attending remotely, please use the raised hand function. We will alternate between speakers in the chamber and remote attendees. For those attending remotely, please note that those in the chamber will be unable to use the chat facility, so please bring your comments to the attention of member services. Committee members who are attending remotely are required to leave their camera on throughout the debate and when voting in order to maintain the integrity of the decision-making process. If you do need to leave the meeting temporarily, pop a message in the chat function so the Democratic Services Officer is aware, and then let us know when you return. Can I again stress this week that I expect everyone present and participating in this meeting to conduct themselves appropriately and be respectful to each other. That applies to members, officers, and anyone in the public gallery. This is particularly in light of the meeting 2 weeks ago, so I would like to stress that again. This is a place of work. It's not for throwing insults around. When I open up the debate to members, I will ask committee members to speak and put their questions first, followed by non-committee members. Whilst I do not wish to stifle debate, can I remind members that any questions should be focused on the subject matter and to avoid repetition. If I feel the length of individual speeches are negatively impacting on the overall time for discussion and becoming unmanageable, I will defer to the committee's rules of procedure, which limits the length of speeches to 5 minutes. So moving on to the agenda, we've got item 1, apologies for absence. Sally, have we any apologies, please? Oh, let's see if we... Oh, microphone's not working. Good. Yeah. No.
After all that, no apologies, Chair.
Declarations of interest, anybody? No. Okay, we move on to item 3, urgent matters. I'm not aware of any urgent matters. Item 4, the minutes of the informal meeting of Overview and Scrutiny Committee Chairs and Vice Chairs, pages 3 to 5. Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Paul propose, seconder. Councillor Gareth, thank you. If everyone would like to show. Thank you. Item 5, minutes of the Conway Opportunities Board, pages 6 to 7. Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Anyone? Councillor Gareth? Seconder. Councillor Chant, thank you very much. And if everyone would like to show. Thank you. Item 6, questions to Cabinet members. There are none, which makes them very happy. Item 7A, local government budget 2024-2025, pages 8 to 28. Councillor Charlie, the leader, is going to introduce the report, and Amanda Hughes, our Strategic Director of Finance and Resources, will present the report. Thank you very much.
Diolch yn fawr, the Barada, pawb. I'd like to start by thanking Amanda for producing this report, which as always is really clear and detailed, and it sets out the really stark situation that we find ourselves in. Members will be aware that we have a legal duty to set a balanced budget. But it's interesting, what do we mean by a balanced budget? The Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounts, whilst it states that we have to set out a balanced budget, that's not actually defined by law. So that means it's up to our Chief Financial Officer to use their professional judgment to ensure the local authority's budget is robust and sustainable. And that's the purpose of this report, which clearly sets out the situation, as I said. I'll let Amanda actually take you through the report itself, but I think it's worth repeating that when we refer to a budget, we don't use the word in the sense that most people will understand it. Whilst we do start the year with a given amount of money, we cannot legally stop delivering statutory services if the demand or the cost exceeds the amount of money that we have available. So this report is essentially an estimate of the cost and of the presumed need. According to a report issued by CIFRA in 2006, councils have over 1,000 statutory duties that we are required to deliver by law. Again, very inconveniently, very few of them are actually physically prescribed in law. So it's a matter of judgment as to how those statutory services are actually delivered. And indeed, the line between statutory and non-statutory services is not at all clearly defined. If we get that judgment wrong, then we're potential of judicial review. So against that background, it's very clear that the next few months are going to be incredibly challenging, and indeed the years ahead of there. Members will be well aware of the options that are presented us. We can make further cuts to our budget. This council has delivered around £80 million of cuts over the last 10 years. I think a more salient fact is actually since 2015, we've lost 19% of our workforce. I think if there were 19% less nurses, 90% less police, 90% less firemen, people would be really concerned, but it doesn't really seem to trigger the same response, unfortunately, when it's council workers, but clearly that affects our ability to deliver services to our most vulnerable. Council tax now makes up 30% of our income. We had the highest rise in Wales last year at 9.9%. At a time when people are really struggling. We're all incredibly conscious of that. Historically, since '96, we've had a lower council tax rate than our neighbours, Denbighshire. Back in the day, that was as much as 20%. That's gradually narrowed year after year after year. Last year was the first time we were actually slightly higher than Denbighshire. We're still significantly lower than Gwynedd. Once again, it's worth pointing out that per head, compared to Denbighshire, we receive 15% less funding than Denbighshire residents and 10% per head less funding than our neighbours in Gwynedd. Council tax is incredibly unpopular. We know it's an unfair and regressive tax. We know it doesn't reflect people's ability to pay. I think more importantly is we all see it leave our bank accounts every single month. We're at a time where the level of personal tax has never been higher, but less and less comes back to local government, more is diverted towards the health service and other services, but ours is incredibly visible, and we as people in our communities are also highly visible. People are very conscious of the decisions that we make. The third other option is reserves. When I joined this council in 2017, we had the lowest reserves in Wales. That situation has improved a little bit, but we still are amongst the lowest in Wales. So again, it's very difficult for us to try and bail ourselves out of this situation. Much of that is based on the fact that over the years we had a low rate of council tax and we collected far less than our neighbours. Over a 10-year period, that would be sort of around £50 million compared to Denbighshire, around £60–70 million compared to Gwynedd. But those decisions were made in the past for a very good reason, because raising council tax is unpopular and quite a painful thing to do. And it's absolutely right as elected members that we try and manage the public budget as best we can. So we are where we are. If we don't find a solution to this, it'll be full council who will adopt the final budget in spring next year. We're in section 114 territory, and that's been a lot more in the news than would have been the case a few years ago. But essentially it means an external commissioner will come in. There'll be no more money. Someone will come in and make those difficult decisions for us. In Croydon, that resulted in a 15% increase in council tax because they felt that was necessary. You'll always see that they're going to protect statutory services, but as I've already pointed out, the definition of what level they are provided at varies. It's not clear. We're seeing in Birmingham proposals to sell off all the libraries, to sell off the museums, to sell off their 54,000 council houses. All of these have consequences. But on a more local level, there was a story in the Nottingham and local press this week. A homeless mother, 2 children who are 11 and 13, received a phone call at 9:45 in the morning saying she was being evicted from the hotel at 12 o'clock out onto the street because the council no longer had the funds to pay for that. So that's the reality of what the situation could be. It won't be easy. We were all elected to serve our communities. We all were elected to want to improve the situation in our communities. But a bit like marriage, it's a bit of a rich and a poorer situation. It's all the more important that we work together when times are difficult, because we have to minimise the impact that stripping this amount of money out of our budget will have. And that will only happen if we all pull together on this, because this is really, really important, members. So I will let Amanda take you through the report. I would just like to say that when I've looked at the CIPRA guidance on other authorities where there's been Section 114, a common theme is people's failure to recognise the seriousness of the situation that they're in. This report is brought to you earlier than normal in the budget cycle, because it is absolutely vitally we all get this into our head that this is a really difficult and a really serious situation. With that in mind, I've sent a letter today to Rebecca Evans, the Minister for Local Government Finance, clearly setting out the challenge that we face in Conwy. We have other issues in terms of social care. We know we've increased spending on social care by 36% over the last 4 years. As people are well aware, the cost of nursing home, the cost of children looked after continues to soar. That's a problem throughout the country, not just Conwy, but as we have a third higher than the Welsh average, English average for over 65s, clearly it impacts on us more. So I've set out the challenges that we face. This will be the first of many meetings where the detail is given to members, but I absolutely want to stress again the seriousness of the situation that we're in. So, diolch pawb.
Thank you, Chair, as well. Thank you, Charlie, for the introduction. So just to take you through the detail of the report. As Charlie says, this is coming to you earlier than it has before, and in fact, before we've received the draft settlement, which isn't due until the 20th of this month. So to that extent, I've obviously had to make an assumption of what I believe might be based on information that's been previously announced by Welsh Government and obviously what was, or rather wasn't announced as part of the Chancellor of the Exchequer's recent autumn statement. And therefore that position may well change, but at the same time I don't anticipate in changing with any significant relief. So just to touch then on the settlement. When we had the current year's final settlement, it was announced in that there would be an increase in AEF funding of £169 million across Wales in 24-25, which is an increase of 3.06% on average across Wales. We historically haven't received the average. We've invariably received a below average settlement because of the way the numbers crunch, but further than that, we also know that the second year of the impact of the change in the census data, where Conwy saw a relative reduction in an absolute reduction and a relative reduction as compared to the rest of Wales, which impacts on the settlement as well, and we've got the second year of that to come through into the settlement. So therefore, for the purposes of the figures in this report, I've assumed for the minute that we'll only get an increase of about 2.5%, which equates to more or less £5 million. You know, I might be on the marginally conservative side there, but you know, the difference of another percent, you're talking sort of 1.5, 2 million sort of tops, and we certainly won't be up at the average. Almost definitely not, based on history. So it had been hoped, as was the case last year. You'll recall in the autumn statement last year, the Chancellor gave additional money to protect social care and education, and that came through to Wales as a consequential. And it was hoped, I guess there was prospects. Certainly Michael Gove was suggesting there were Christmas presents under the tree. That clearly didn't come through for local government, and in fact the budget appeared to give no further funding to local government at all, and the consequential that has been in the press about the 305 million consequential was effectively just the second year impact of last year's figures, which was already in Welsh Government's planning assumptions. So we'll see on the 20th whether we get slightly more than the 5 million I've estimated, but as I say, anything obviously will be welcome, but it certainly won't be in the millions to provide any further significant relief to the position. So I've set out in table 1 what the resource shortfall is currently looking like, and effectively, what I would say obviously is that the economic conditions that were apparent last year have continued into this year, and the forecasts by the OBR and others around how anticipated fall of inflationary rates, fall in average pay, etc. If you go back a year ago, that was probably expected to fall at much greater rates than the reality has turned out to be the case, and therefore these are the pressures that we're facing effectively for next year, and essentially an awful lot of the business cases and the pay pressures that we have that are set out in table 1 are ultimately driven by inflation, both pay inflation and price inflation. And it's stark to note, actually, just in global terms, you can see effectively detailed there. There's pay pressure for teaching staff, pay pressure for local government staff, and within the business cases, in the detail of that, there is also a significant business case which is for effectively the pay pressures of care workers who, Welsh Government, you'll recall, gave a commitment that all care workers would be paid the real living wage. So we rightly also therefore have to pass on money to our extended workforce that operate for us through the independent sector. So in total, of the pressures that are in this report there at 25 million, of those pressures, you're probably talking getting on for 17-18 million of them are purely pressures driven by pay and price inflation, as opposed to anything else, the rest being demand. So just to sort of highlight that at this point. So I guess in presenting this report to you, I want to go through the detail in terms of some of those assumptions that I've made, because I think it's critical that you understand the assumptions that I've put in and feel content with them. Obviously, I've extensively tried to research and use all the information available to me to come up with the assumptions that I've come up with, but at the end of the day, some of them are essentially guessing games, and therefore I want you to be clear and content with them as well. And in particular, therefore, I talk about pay, the pay pressures. So we fortunately the pay awards in the current year have been settled at the levels that were in the budget. So that's fortuitous because we don't have ongoing pressures being brought forward from those, except for 2 small elements. So just to touch on those first of all, the first small element where we're having to pick up effectively ongoing pressures from historic pay awards are firstly to do with teaching staff, where in September 22, you'll recall a pay award was offered to teachers in September 22 of 5%. There was then a period of unrest and strike action, and Welsh Government then changed their mind and awarded the teachers an additional 3% pay, up to 8%. 1.5% of that was unconsolidated, so therefore didn't go into the ongoing pay bill, but the other 1.5% was consolidated. In 22-23 and in 23-24, that additional cost has been funded by grant. It's about £800,000. All the indications are that grant funding won't be available next year, and therefore that will fall onto us as an ongoing cost. So in that 4407 that's set out in table 1, 800 of it relates to that historic award from 22, and the rest of it is an assumption of a 5% pay award for teachers in September well, in fact, they've had September 23, so we know that. So it's the sort of part year effect of the actual award that's happened in the current year, and it's a part year effect of an anticipated pay award in September 24, which I've estimated at 5%. The OBR's average earnings forecast for next year actually is a little bit less than that. It's 3.7%. But I've taken a view that, in my judgment, 5% might be a more realistic level for teachers, and that's because I think historically, as compared to other public sector pay, the teachers' pay award has tended to be at the more generous end of the overall different awards across the public sector, and therefore, to me, I think even with that lower OBR forecast, I think it would be a little bit naive to go as low as that. I can also just confirm that across the treasurers across Wales, in terms of the modelling assumptions that have been used across Wales, they come out at an average of 4.5%. So, as I say, I've put 5% in, and I'm drawing that to your attention because that might be something that within the equation, that's something that to be considered. The second issue then with pay that I want to draw to your attention is the local government staff. Now, the local government staff. So two things on this. So first of all, you'll recall we made a last-minute decision in setting the 23-24 budget to fund the current year's pay award, about 700,000 from balances, and the reason for that was because just literally a handful of days prior to council making its decision, and after the point that Cabinet had recommended a budget onto council, the national employer made a pay offer to local government staff, and we were in a position to estimate prior to the council decision. We were in a position to estimate that had a shortfall of 700,000, and therefore, because we had no choice at that point but to put balances in, the budget was balanced in that way with that pressure. So that's been built into the ongoing budget, and then I've estimated for April 24, I've estimated a pay award of 6%. Again, higher than the 3.7 OBR forecast, but the reason for this is, and I've set it out in the paragraphs around table 2, local government staff pay award at the bottom end of the scale is very, very much dictated by the national living wage movement. So effectively, the lowest point that a local government staff member earns in current money is £11.59, and the national living wage applicable from the 1st of April 23 is £10.42. So there's about a pound, a little bit more than a pound's headroom between the lowest pay of a local government member of staff and the national living wage. You'll have seen recently, in the autumn statement last week, that the Chancellor has increased the national living wage for applicable from the 1st of April 24 to £11.44, thereby reducing that headroom to just 15 pence. So when the national employer considers the pay offer that it intends to make, and obviously the unions will be considering this from their demands as well, there is a need, effectively, because the pay award is never settled by the 1st of April, and because you have to legally pay the national living wage on the 1st of April, the national employer and the union will have to have in mind what it believes the national living wage on the 1st of April 25 will be, in order to set the pay award on the 1st of April 24, because it needs to set a rate on the 1st of April 24 that will be above the national living wage on the 1st of April 25. So if you assume that the national living wage were to go up another £1 for the following year, and you know, if you look at the pattern of the national living wage over the last few years, it went from 8.90 to 9.50 to 10.42 to 11.44. It doesn't seem inconceivable, especially given that inflation is still higher than expected, that it would potentially go up another £1 in the following year, which would mean that equally then the lowest paid scale of local government member staff would equally also have to go up for £1. You'll recall that the last couple of years, the national employer has moved away from a blanket percentage increase on every scale, and in fact has moved to a cash offer on each incremental point. And while inflation still runs high, I would expect that the national employer will continue on that kind of basis. And in fact, you know, intelligence that I've had through meetings, etc., would indicate that. So on the basis that there's a £1 increase, then that would require that cash lump sum on each pay point to be £1,625. The last couple of years it's been 1925, but if we assume it's 1625, then that will result in an average pay scale for us in percentage terms for Conwy at about 6%. And hence why I've used 6% as the assumption in terms of making those pay estimates. So apologies for going through all of that in a lot of detail, but I think it's important that you understand the basis of the assumptions that I've made, and obviously you know, why they therefore form such significant pressures in terms of the extra pressures that we have in because of pay and price inflation. And again, you know, interesting to know, I talked earlier, didn't I, that maybe by the time you take the staff, the direct staff plus the indirect staff, that actually those pay pressures amount to around £17 million. It's interesting to note, therefore, that the settlement from Welsh Government, which may give us around £5 million, is clearly insufficient to meet the inflationary pressure from pay that is absolutely out with our control. We have no say on national pay awards. We have no ability to influence it. You know, it's driven through government, yet the funding to support those costs isn't matched. So the other moving on then to the other big elements that make up the pressures, is the next one, or the next two lines in table 1 relate to capital financing costs. So the first figure is the impact of interest rate increases, which have been significant for us because we have quite a lot of short-term borrowing. That's the sort of historic policy that was pursued to take the benefit of all the low interest rates in the past, but unfortunately it's biting us a little bit now because we're completely exposed to the increasing interest rates. They're currently at 5.25%, and we, in general terms, have to borrow about 0.5% above that. So that top figure effectively is the full cost of the borrowing and interest costs relating to the capital programme that's approved by members at this point in time, the existing capital programme. The next figure, the 292, is the capital financing costs relating to if we borrowed in accordance with the capital allocation we'll get in 24-25. No, I don't actually know what the capital allocation for 24-25 will be, but for the last 2 or 3 years it's been in the region of about £6 million, and therefore, which is made up actually of 3 million of grant and 3 million of capacity to borrow. So that 292 is the cost of the borrowing if we set a capital programme in the region of £6 million. Members will be aware that the requests and the business cases submitted for capital are far in excess of £6 million, and therefore to the extent that members support a capital programme that's more than £6 million, then that will be further cost that will need to be added into the budget. So effectively that's a direct choice then between building the cost in for capital that's supported and effectively the impact that would have to have in terms of either additional council tax increase or additional budget reductions. We then have the levies. Predominantly, the biggest levy increase that we're facing is the North Wales Fire and Rescue Authority, and obviously the committee's heard previously from the fire officer, chief fire officer, about their consultation and what have you. We are hoping, and we understand through various communication channels that fire authority have been working hard to identify further savings and efficiencies, and maybe the initial ask might reduce down a little bit, but I don't have that in any I don't have the clarity of that as yet, but it might reduce it down by a couple of 100,000 maybe, which obviously is all to the good. So time will tell on that one. I've allowed or I've built into the budget now the additional income that we will be gaining as a result of council's decision to increase the council tax premium. Obviously, just to stress again that the choices or the decision by council to increase the premium was done for policy reasons, to help support bringing houses back into use and to support the local market and to support local residents. The purpose of those policy changes wasn't to generate income, and that therefore wasn't the driver, but nonetheless it has the side benefit of generating income, and that's been built into the base now, along with the increase. Every year obviously there's a slight increase in the council tax base as properties are built and so on and so forth. And then the final chunk, which I appreciate the detail isn't before you. There's a budget working group for members next week. Is the business cases, and whilst the figure I've put in, the 15 million there, is the ballpark of what the business cases requests come to. Obviously, it's up for members again to decide which of those they support, and therefore that figure may well come down and the pressure may well come down. Having said that, I would say that a substantial chunk of the business cases do relate to that inflationary pressure. So pay inflation in particular through the care fee and domiciliary care fee business cases. Also, there's indexation on certain contracts. The waste contracts, for instance, have contractual indexation increases based on CPI and so on and so forth. So a number of the business cases are absolutely there to support essentially unavoidable costs as a result of pay and price inflation, and therefore I don't want members to think it's all speculative and fanciful requests for more funding. An awful lot of it is absolutely unavoidable and essential. Having said that, as I say, there'll be a budget working group next week where members can see that in detail, see those in detail, and get to understand the basis of the business cases, and then in due course they'll come back into the democratic arena through the reports for consideration in terms of explicit support or otherwise. So I think I've taken you therefore through the detail of the pressures that we face. So as I say, net of that additional income, the pressures come to £24.5 million. I would also just quickly flag that another cost that will take place from the 1st of April 24 is that the Teachers' Pension Fund has just had its latest actuarial revaluation, and in fact the employer's teachers pension contribution is going to increase by 5%. That will cost us about £2.5 million, but to date my understanding is that that funding will be provided from UK government through Welsh government as consequential. If it isn't, then that's another pressure. And whilst I've been trying to ascertain the certainty of that, the certainty isn't yet there, albeit the promise is. So time will tell. So 24.5 million, therefore, in terms of pressures, on the basis that that's fully funded. So moving then to the point of how do we address this shortfall? Well, we are effectively there's only really 3 or 4 ways to do it. So one of which is obviously that we can, as I say, potentially make different decisions about some of those business cases, to the extent that certainly some of the business cases are submitted to address risk, address concerns over the level of service that we are providing, or the backlog in cases that we're dealing with, etc. We can, as an authority, choose to nonetheless continue to ride out those risks and not address those pressures because we can't afford to, and therefore maybe some of the business cases can not go forward. Thereafter, then we're into the 3 key areas. So the first one I've referenced in the report there is obviously budget reductions, and effectively, perhaps, just to reflect here, whichever way, well, what budget reductions are effectively is an absorption of cost. I've set out, we've got pressures of 24.5 million. We're likely to get funding of about 5 million. So there's 20 million pounds of pressure, of unavoidable cost, largely unavoidable cost, that we're just going to have to absorb within our existing base. And therefore, in order to absorb it, it means that there would have to be either significant efficiencies or budget reductions. As Charlie's already outlined, services have already faced £80 million of absorption in the last decade, and actually, significant proportion of that over that period of time has come through changing the ways we work and trying to drive efficiency, and therefore, in reality, at this stage, whilst I'm not saying that there isn't scope for further efficiency through the use of, say, digital and that kind of stuff, it is nonetheless, we are nonetheless in the realms of service cuts and reductions. So that's obviously an area that members can choose. The other area is council tax increases. Obviously, that would supplement the additional 5 million we're getting from Welsh Government, with further income coming in. And then the final place we could consider is reserves and balances. Now, I really would have to urge caution in the context of reserves and balances. As Charlie's already outlined, we absolutely hold one of the lowest level of reserves and balances across Wales. We've discussed it here on a number of occasions. The reserves policy seeks or sets a target for us to hold 5% of our net revenue budget as in general balances. We currently hold 1.5% in our balances, in our general balances. We have earmarked reserves, certainly, but they're not significant. But I think the biggest reason that members will need to be very, very cautious about the use of balances is ultimately it's one-off money. If the budget is plugged with one-off money, then all it does is mean the gap the following year is even bigger, and it then means that you've spent your one-off reserves, which are there for resilience. we've had a recent incident, haven't we? We've got Storm Babette, which is costing the authority 1.3 million pound. And whilst we're able to seek to gain financial support from Welsh Government under the emergency scheme, there's a threshold of 580 odd thousand pound that we're going to have to pick up. If we didn't hold balances, we would not be able to pick up those kind of one-off extreme type events, which is the whole point of us holding that rainy day money anyway. So to the extent that members consider using reserves, then I think it really would have to be very much in the context of if there were any one-off calls on the budget, and or if it was for bridging a period of movement from whilst the saving proposal was implemented or so on and so forth. So, where maybe it can't be implemented from the 1st of April, but it can be implemented from the 1st of September, and therefore to bridge that short window, that one-off cost window. Other than that, I think members would need to be very, very, very careful in terms of using reserves and balances otherwise. I've set out in table 4 the reserves and balances that we hold. These are the revenue reserves. We do have capital reserves separately, but capital can only be used for capital. So these are the reserves that can be used for revenue purposes. So you can see that we have 35.5, bit over 35.5 million. 10 million of that sits with schools. So actually it's 25.5 million for everything else. And a number of those reserves are, as I say, earmarked for specific purposes, be it to do with insurance reserves or home to school transport reserve or overspending, etc. And also out of there is already that call of 720,000 that we used in the current year's budget, which I referenced earlier, and certainly there will be other uses of those reserves during the current financial year. So in fact, the likelihood of us having 35.6 million on the 1st of April 24 is unlikely, and because obviously the other issue that I haven't spoken about yet is obviously the current year's predicted or forecast overspend at the moment, which, as you recall from the last meeting, where you considered the mid-year revenue outturn, we were forecast at that point to be overspent by 3.8 million pound. I'm also aware since then that there are new pressures in some areas that we weren't aware of at that time, which may well make that position worse than the 3.8. But having said that, obviously this committee and cabinet subsequently supported again that we reinforced the message to all heads of service and budget holders of the need to pause, delay, stop non-essential spend in the current financial year, so that we can try and pull that back to as close to zero as possible. And in some instances, if some services can even go the other way and underspend, then that's all to the good and will help our balance position. So although I've set out in table 4 that we have 35.7 million at the start of this financial year, as I say, I think the likelihood is at the 1st of April 2024 we'll have significantly less than that, and therefore that again is another reason to err significant caution in using balances to resolve the budget position. It really would merely be a staving off of even worse and more difficult decisions further down the line. I have set out in table 5 the income that would be achieved through different increases in council tax, ranging from 5 to 10%. And as I say, any increase in council tax will therefore bring in additional income into our budget position. I would also just equally flag here again the North Wales Fire Authority, to the extent that the North Wales Fire Authority, I think at the moment I've assumed that the ask from them will be just over £1 million. It may well come down a little bit, or we're hoping it's going to come down from the noises that we've had. But even so, even if it were in the realms of £700,000 or £800,000, then effectively that would be equating to about 1% in council tax, and more, subject to what it turns out to be. So members, need to consider that as well in the context of any increase in council tax, that we're not just trying to bring in funds for ourselves, but we're also trying to bring in funds to finance that call on the North Wales Fire Authority. So table 6, I've just slotted in the figures based on if those different council tax levels were applied, and obviously it could be anything in between those, and effectively it therefore, if it's kept at the lower end of 5%, then effectively that brings our remaining shortfall down to just around 21 million, notwithstanding any of the other decisions about the business cases. But that would mean therefore that across all of services there would need to be budget reductions or absorption of cost, as I say, of 9.4%, and then obviously less if the council tax were to go up to either of the other two scenarios. I've set out in table 7 what the impact of those council tax rises would be on different bands. So you can see that an increase, a 5% increase, increases somebody who is paying the full council tax, so without any single person discount or other discount, etc., and that increases council tax by £79 per year. For somebody with a single person discount, it would be £59, and for somebody who's fully entitled to council tax reduction, then obviously it would be nil. Just to confirm, there around in terms of our overall dwellings, so we have in the county about just shy of 56,000 dwellings that are subject to council tax. Around 21,500 of those households will get a single person discount, and around 10,500 of those households are in receipt of some form of council tax reduction, and potentially therefore pay nothing to their council tax. It's also then worth looking forward to the following years as well, and I guess I make this point in the context of, particularly in the context of that use of balances, in the context of, could we plug the budget for a year because things are going to get better in the future? Well, unfortunately, things aren't getting better in the future. So table 8 sets out forecasts for 25-26 and 26-27, and in there then effectively I've forecast for pay again on lower rates obviously than I'm forecasting for next year. I would anticipate them to come down in the following year and the year after that, again based on OBR forecasts. Also, these figures take account of the fact that I am expecting, again based on forecasts from our Treasury advisors and OBR forecasts, that interest rates will reduce in the following 2 years, and therefore that will bring our liability down for those interest costs, which I've built into there. And I've also then looked at what's likely to happen in terms of AEF, and actually, rather worryingly, although there's no information from Welsh Government, the Wales fiscal analysis actually anticipate that the level of AEF from Welsh Government in 25-26 and 26-27 will fall in cash terms from its current levels, and therefore I've taken account of that in those forecasts. So you can see that actually we're facing in the current, for 24-25, we're facing the 24.5 million shortfall, but we will also be facing potentially a 17.5 million further shortfall in 25-26 and a nearly 15 million shortfall in 26-27, unless there were some significant change in levels of support for local government through national and Welsh government funding. I would just say that, obviously, there's a general election due next year. Time will tell whether there's a change in government. But what I think I would observe from historic changes in government is that whilst different governments might pursue different economic policies and might have different attitudes towards public sector, it will often take at least a couple of years before there's any changes as a result of any change in government, because they have to continue with the previous government's economic forecasting for a little bit yet. So in the context of these 2 years, then I think these are more likely to still be comparatively realistic about what those years might look like, even if there were a change in government. So moving on then, just to talk about risks. I've set out in table 9 the monetary value of different risks to the extent that I've made incorrect assumptions in the figures that I provided. I think the critical one really to draw attention to is to do with pay. So to the extent that I'm wrong with my 6% on local government staff and 5% on teaching staff, to the extent I've got that wrong, then every percent for local government staff is about 1.1 million, and every percent for teaching staff is 533 million. So it really is with pay. What you want to do is get it right, because at the end of the day, if I'm under, then that causes us a shortfall, and if I'm over, then the danger then is obviously that harsher decisions will need to be made because I've put aside money that I didn't actually need to put aside. So that was why I spent so much time taking you through my assumptions in relation to pay, so that you understood where I was coming from. And then the other big risk, I think, is that teachers' pension increase. As I say, I really am hopeful that funding will flow for that, but still feel a little bit nervous that might not be the case. I guess the biggest risk that we're facing, table 9 sets out some monetary risks, but actually the really significant risk that we're facing is that of a section 114 notice. So just to clarify again, Charlie touched on it, but a section 114 notice effectively is a requirement that would fall on me as the Chief Financial Officer to issue under the Local Government and Finance Act 1988 a section 114 notice to members of council if I felt that the council was not going to be able to balance its budget next year, that it's effectively its resources, it asks in terms of its expenditure were greater than the income that it had available to fund that. It really isn't something to be taken lightly, and I think at the end of the day, we haven't experienced it ourselves. None of our neighbours in Wales have experienced it, thankfully, but it is becoming an increasing issue across English authorities, and I referenced in this report Birmingham City Council as being a recent one, but in fact there was just another one just last week with Nottingham also having a section 114 notice. Gareth attended a WLGA conference last week and updated cabinet the other day about what he'd gleaned from that, from listening to the lead commissioner at Birmingham City Council and also somebody from SIPFA to what it really meant, and as Charlie's outlined, I think it is a misnomer to believe that a statutory service will be protected, because it is evident from the messaging that we've heard that isn't the case. or it isn't the case in the simplistic way that people might think. And certainly there is the message that we need to look in places that we've not looked before in terms of budget reductions, and we can't make an assumption that everything can be protected in the name of statutory services. And actually, more importantly, and I think more importantly for you as members, is what it means is that external people will come in and make the difficult choices and have no regard to local choice. And therefore, whilst I appreciate that you are faced with incredibly difficult and unpalatable choices in coming to set a balanced budget for 24-25, given the scale of the financial gap that we have, it really is a challenge that you will have to take, because if you don't take it, then, as I say, somebody else will come and take it and have no regard for anyone else's views in balancing that position. I think Gareth fed back last week. I can't quite remember the quote exactly, but it was something along it being brutal, bloody, and barbaric, or something of that ilk. Perhaps I didn't remember it right. But anyway, I think that's the reality of the situation, and you know, I really don't want I don't want to be melodramatic, but I don't want members to go away with any illusion either that there are very difficult and unpalatable choices to make between now and the 29th of February, and shying away from doing that really isn't an option. So I hope that has been useful and sets out the context of where we are. As I say, next week we've got the budget working group to look at the business cases, and that hopefully, you know, subject to the decisions taken there, that might provide some minor relief to the figure. But as I say, I really would stress anyway, the bulk of them are merely addressing pay and price inflation. But obviously, following that, further reports will be coming through into democracy in the new year. You'll be aware again through the budget working groups and through other discussions that obviously services have been working and working up proposals in terms of budget reductions, and that information is currently being collated and getting ready to sort of present through to you early in the new year, so that we can still see the scale of the challenge that we have remaining. But as I say, I hope, albeit I appreciate not good news, I hope it's useful that that you've had this sort of consideration at this point in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for that comprehensive report and run through. Thank you. Okay, members, I will now open up for questions. Who's Councillor Paul? Thank you.
I still remain a fan of yours, Amanda, even after that very telling report, and thank you for all your work that you've done. Excuse me. I want to set my questions, which I appreciate will be quite challenging to Amanda, the Chief Executive, and Charlie, in some sort of context. I think the first thing to say is Charlie will know that I will vote for significant council tax increases, significant cuts and savings, and increases in charges. And I'm clear about that in my own mind. I don't think having a section 114 on your CV is something I would want. Colleagues in this chamber know in the 1980s, as a Liverpool Labour councillor, in the battles that I had with the Conservative governments at that time, totally different context, I have got on my CV a surcharge and disqualification. Some people see that as a badge of honour, but it was a very bloody process. It was personally very, very difficult. And the situation we're in today is different, but it is still challenging. And of course, even in that context, where many people thought we got it wrong, we had to make very significant cuts as well. And the most painful of those, I remember, was the rationalisation of our schools, because we'd put those tough decisions off for so long. So my comments are very much in that context today. And the two things I want to focus on is this argument about increasing demand, putting a big pressure on our budget, and what we do about that and how we manage that increasing demand. And obviously the business cases we're dealing with tomorrow is part of that. It seems to me that we must address some of the significant structural issues of the local authority. And I personally, and I've not been very skilled in making much progress on this since my election 18-20 months ago, is the issue of our school estate. Because at the moment, we're managing the pressures through school budget cuts. Now, there is actually not an increasing demand in terms of school places. For many years, the school age population in Conway has not risen. In fact, my research has indicated not since 1991 has the school age population has risen. We have the lowest birth rate now for 100 years, my research indicates. We presently had, and I'd like to thank Matt for his assistance on this, in me getting the final information for a freedom of information request on the extent of our surplus places in schools. We have 1,485 surplus places in primary schools. We have 1,320 surplus places in our secondary schools. 36 of our primary schools are above the Welsh Government target of 10% surplus places. So 36 primary schools and 6 out of our 7 secondary schools. We are in the situation where the Auditor General in his report in 2021 reported to us and said, if primary schools have less than 100 pupils and secondaries have less than 700, they are not viable from a cost and attainment perspective. We have 21 schools under 100 pupils, and we have 21 primary schools under 100, and we have 2 primary schools under 700. Now, these savings are not going to, if we tackle this issue, these savings are not going to accrue immediately, obviously. And as Amanda said quite clearly, in future years, we need to continue to make savings. Next year is not going to be any easier. She also said we have a one-off window, maybe, of using reserves to tackle some of these structural issues. It seems to me an absolute no-brainer that we've got to tackle this issue, and we've got to use this budget to start that process. Now then, people argue back to me why we're not tackling these positions. The professional leadership and the political leadership argue back to me, oh, it's very complicated, it's very difficult, and there will be much controversy in doing this. Closing schools, amalgamating schools, rationalising our school estate, reorganizing them, having bilingual schools, dual stream schools, obviously very respectful as I am of rural schools, hubs, networks of schools, fully supportive of that. But my question very much is, both to the professional leadership and to the political leadership, why is it that you are so resistant to tackling this issue? It has to be done in the present context. We cannot keep on putting off these sorts of difficult decisions. My second point, again, is in relation to particularly social care and the demand in
Councillor
social.
Paul,
I do not deny.
Should we just deal with, Councillor Julie's just indicated she wanted to respond on the schools, and then we'll come to the social care. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Two separate issues. Councillor Julie, if you want to. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I certainly have not suggested it's very complicated and too difficult to address. That's not the case at all. The fact of the matter is we have in recent years closed 6 of our schools. We've federalised a number of schools. 20% of our schools share a head teacher. And in terms of capacity, you have to remember the majority of these schools were built a very, very long time ago. So parts of those schools are possibly unusable. When it was built, it may say that it was built for 200 pupils, but actually in reality, the space within that school may only be available to 150. So it's not as simple as looking at those statistics. And in terms of the birth rate data, Lodi's been working closely with Betsy to get information around actual information and not just coming forward with hearsay and suggestions. And in reality, we are expecting an increase in nursery numbers next year rather. There'll be a fall in 2025. Then in 2026, we are expecting to see the biggest increase we've seen since 2016, with over 1,050 additional learners. So I think we just have to be incredibly careful when we just sit here saying, right, we'll shut this school, shut this school, shut this school. It needs to be done in a way that's appropriate, that's planned. We need to look at where those increases are so that we ensure we're not setting ourselves up for failure by closing certain schools and then finding ourselves trying to build new ones in the coming years, or increasing the cost further of home to school transport. I am absolutely not against looking at this. It is very different to Liverpool. I know you bring that up repeatedly, Paul, but we have to consider the Welsh language. It's incredibly important to us. This is not just schools that are below 100 pupils. This is schools in communities that are well established, been there for a long time, and serve a very different group of people than perhaps an inner city Liverpool school may do. We are in the process, and we're continually looking at ways of addressing this. We spoke about a school merger just recently in one of our meetings. The working group to look at this is in the process of being set up. I had probably jumped the gun in that I wanted us to meet earlier, but it needs to go through the democratic process. So that's coming to Cabinet in the new year for approval, and then that group will meet, and that will be looking at all of this, looking at the statistics, looking at the numbers. But we have to be realistic. This is not the solution. There aren't massive savings to be had by having one school covering a 20-mile area as opposed to 2 smaller schools. We're not suddenly going to find millions of pounds in savings. We have to do it in a methodical way, in a way that works with our communities. We have to listen to them. It is not simple and straightforward. And to suggest that either I or officers are in some way trying to stall, or we don't appreciate the severity of the situation, we absolutely do. We work closely with schools. I am absolutely passionate about making sure every child has every opportunity that they should, and also with the Welsh language, with the smaller schools, we have to do it in a way that's appropriate. But I can assure you, Chair, that I will be with this group turning over every stone, looking at every opportunity, but doing it in a way that we look at how that's worked in other areas so that we get it right, and that we can, yes, find savings, but we do it in an appropriate way that doesn't impact on the people that we look after, and in particular the young young children. So yeah, I just think it's important that we don't just talk about the birth rates going down and down and down. That's not the case. Those are the stats that have come out just recently that show the biggest increase in 10 years. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Julie. So, Councillor Paul, if you want to come on to your second point now, your social care one.
Well, I just like to come
Just
back on one
briefly go
item, because
back on that,
we
then
are
we'll go.
proposing at the moment 10% school budget cuts. We may have to go further than 10% school budget cuts. That to me is a very crude mechanism to deal with these issues, because what will happen as a result of these, because let's remember what happens this last year. Schools actually got a cash increase. The vast majority of them have decided not to take decisions in this financial year. They've used reserves, so they're in a much more vulnerable position to face the budget decisions. Many of them are not yet even talking about preparing and planning for redundancies. My own head teacher, where I'm on an LEA governor, told me quite clearly, he said, until I get my final budget decision, I'm not going to even start the process. So we're going to be in a very messy situation come the next financial year, where again, schools will be seeking emergency budgets. There will be enormous pressure to resolve the redundancy issues that will be there. And to say that the present position, as Julie has asserted, is methodical is a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. It is a sort of crisis management reactive position, because we haven't taken the difficult structural decisions historically. Let me go on to the other points I want to make.
Can I just come back in? I was talking about methodical in terms of when you're looking at school closures, Paul, and I'd be incredibly careful. Schools are working really hard. They're working hard with their governing bodies. The majority of councillors within this chamber are governors on school governing bodies, and they're working incredibly hard to find solutions to this. And I think it's really unfair of you to say that schools are doing nothing and to use words like nonsense. It isn't a nonsense. They're working incredibly hard. We've had a number of redundancies this last year. A lot of schools are just not replacing staff. When they usually over the years, they'll put someone in temporarily and then they will make them permanent. They're just not doing that now. Those fixed term appointments are not being continued. And that's how they're making reductions. The staffing levels in school are significantly less than they were. So you need to be really careful. This is a public meeting when you sit and use words like nonsense when we're talking about the work that schools are putting in. It's completely inappropriate. They're working very hard. And I think that's incredibly unfair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Julie. And I know from my own post box the concerns from parents of children with additional learning needs in our schools. That's increasing all the time at the moment. So we'll go on to your second point now, social care. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of social care, and I'll say it within our schools, there are lots of good people doing good work every day, doing their best to manage the present situation. And I'm not in denial about that good work that's been done. And I think most people who listen to me in a public forum or officers or whatever, I'm not attacking people personally. I'm trying to get people to grow people's need to address the key issues. Now, in social care, again, every day we've got good people on the front line managing the statutory duties that they have. And they know, and they will tell me, and they will tell all councillors, and you've just referred to it as well about additional learning needs, because they are also in this context where they're juggling their statutory duties. They're juggling who to prioritise, whose statutory duty has the greatest priority. And they're making very, very difficult decisions about that. And most of these, I would call them vulnerable residents, if they're in social care, and children with additional learning needs and their parents and all of those, what they know is that they will have to wait for services. They will have to wait for assessments. They will have to wait for provision of services, for their care plans to be implemented. And even within them, even if they've got a good care plan, there were very, very difficult decisions every day of a sibling group coming into our care where they have to separate those siblings, separate them and send them to different places. And there will be great problems in those sibling groups seeing each other. So very, very difficult decisions. Now, what my complaint is that we need to communicate that reality, that hard reality to our residents. Because what we know is if they complain, if they put formal complaints in, even if they litigate against us, their case inevitably will get more attention. But most of these people, these vulnerable people, they don't litigate, they don't put in formal complaints, they just suffer in silence. So what we've got to do again, and it's my same argument, and there are really good people working on this, the people online I can see today in social services working on this, but we've got to be even more efficient, both to get this information into the public domain, but also to ensure that every one of our structures enables our frontline staff to make these difficult decisions, because we cannot meet every statutory duty. Now, I know if it goes to court, the court will say to us, doesn't matter that you haven't got the money, you've still got to meet that statutory duty. Your defence can't be, we haven't been allocated enough taxpayers' money from the UK government or from the Welsh government. It's not an argument we can use in the courts. Rin will confirm this, Matt will confirm this. So what we've got to do is we've got to do more work on ensuring particularly these vulnerable people know the reality. And again, we talk about homelessness. I was dealing with a homeless case where a young man was living in a tent. And those are the hard realities. And that person, as far as I know today, is still living in a tent. What we've got to do is we've got to deal with some of these structural issues within the councils, and we've got to stop avoiding them. Now, people will say to me, you're being unreasonable, your challenges are unreasonable, your questions are unreasonable. But what I believe is the public want these matters addressed. They've been deferred and deferred and deferred. They need to be addressed.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. I know very well as a corporate parent, as we all do, the care given by our social care to the likes of the issues with sibling groups and everything like that. It's at the forefront of what everyone does. And I really don't know where, I'm sure Councillors Penny and Liz want to come back in on that, but how we cut those budgets. Do we not pay nursing homes? I just don't know what quite what suggestion you're making there. So Councillors Penny or Liz, who's going to? Okay, thank you, Councillor Penny.
Wrong button.
Oh, there you go.
Thank
You're
you
on.
very much. I couldn't agree more with you, Paul, in that we have to communicate to the public the actual problems that we are facing, but we need to be able to do this in a manner which is we can put over to the public exactly what is happening today. We talk about how we can make changes, but when we have 80%, I'll just quote here the figures that I've got here for you. If you say that we need to be carrying out assessments sooner, and we are in a situation at the moment where we have got 86 vacancies across social care, which is circa 10% of the staff complement, and 27 of these roles are filled with agency workers due to recruitment difficulties. It is so difficult for those assessments to be carried out on time. You talk about juggling, and it's the same with families juggling how they're going to manage their day. If you have a drug addiction problem or an alcohol problem, you juggle what you are going to do on that day, serve your needs or serve your children's needs. And these are getting worse and worse and worse each day. So I haven't got a magic answer, Councillor Paul, but it is something that we seriously have to consider what we do. I can quote to you here, only in October, 5 children that have had to come into care because of one was physically aggressive towards his mother and younger siblings, a young man with disability, and provider gave us notice as they could not meet his needs. Child 3 was a young person with extreme behaviours and no local placements could be secured, had to go into England. I could quote and quote, and the cost of these are quite horrendous. So on a daily basis, social care are facing these problems every day. So there is no magic answer. I'm sure Councillor Penny will come in.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penny.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, councillors. Yes, Paul, this is a very difficult situation, isn't it? However, communication, I agree, we have to get back to communication and how we tell everyone what we're doing, how we're doing it. We have got staffing shortages, which Councillor Liz has already outlaid, and it's vulnerable people need the very best of everything, not the minimum of everything. And this is what our teams at Conway try to help, try to assist. And I do feel that each councillor sitting here or sitting online or sitting in the chamber at full council have 100% responsibility to ensure that anyone in their ward that they are aware of who is vulnerable takes action, contacts the local facility or department in Conway and gets directive action. We know how effective our officers are. Every day they jump to emergency situations to make sure that the most vulnerable are looked after. And let's not forget all the other people that need to be looked after as well. It's not only people who present as most vulnerable that need to be looked after. So there is no magic answer. We have got statutory services, but then we need to be mindful that if UK government do come in, then there's some magic ingredient that they can strike off statutory services. And I think we need deeper clarity about that. If UK government can do that, then why are we held to account that this is statutory, we can't affect it? So I'll hand over to Jenny now, who's desperate to come in, I think, or Kat. Nope, they're not. But I know they will.
Yes,
They will support what I'm saying, or
No.
possibly have a different take.
this is challenging.
got to work on my desperate face.
Penny. So
Thank you.
Reen, I was about to say Councillor Reen, but go for it, Reen.
Definitely don't deserve that promotion, Gerald.
Demotion.
Yes, I think from the discussion, the points I would like to make is that heads of services, managers and staff throughout the authority are at the moment going through an incredibly difficult and stressful process. We're trying to identify savings from a pot that has shrunk significantly over the past 10 to 13 years. It's been an annual event, but it is becoming even more difficult. So what you will find over the next couple of months is some of the proposals that will be coming through to you will be unpalatable. They will be difficult. So I wouldn't want anybody to think that that's not happening. It is on a daily basis at the moment. And as Councillor Charlie rightly said, all the issues that are happening with authorities over the border at the moment stem from authorities not taking those difficult decisions at the right time. And clearly, all our heads of service are engaged on this and know the challenge that we're facing. I would also point out that the authorities that have gone through a 114 process in England up to now have been ones that have had issues, specific issues, be those investment issues or whatever, which have been very challenging for those authorities. What we're now seeing is there are tens, if not hundreds of authorities across the country who haven't done that. As has been pointed out today, these are pressures that come from a long period of cuts aligned with inflation and interest rates. A lot of that is not within our control. But all I will say is that you will find over the next couple of months that you will be faced with very challenging decisions that will affect both us internally, but more poignantly, the residents out there. It's inevitable. Every single local authority in Wales is going through exactly the same thing as we are at the moment. And I'd like to make that absolutely clear. Last year, we were on our own, really, in terms of where we were, and Charlie's outlined there's reasoning behind that. This year, every single local authority in Wales will be going through what we're going through now. Those difficult decisions will be countrywide. So I'd just like to make it clear that we're not shirking difficult decisions. We will bring options forward to you, and those won't be easy at all. So I just wanted to make that point. And in terms of specific issues around housing, I think to be fair, we were in social care scrutiny last week, and Ashley was there and she presented and she explained the process. So if there is anybody out there who comes across individuals who are homeless, there are avenues to go down. There are people who can contact. We have teams in place to go out. So I would ask anybody who finds themselves in a position like that to get in touch with the relevant housing department.
Thank you.
Just
Ian.
come back on that, please.
Well, Councillor Charlie wanted to come in then. You just come back briefly, and we've got another 3 speakers, and we're already 20 minutes over. So come along.
Yeah, as somebody who shares a board with you, Paul, I just want to see some clarity when you say you're helping a homeless individual, because I spoke to you after the previous meeting and asked you who the individual was. You weren't aware. You said somebody had bumped into somebody. I messaged you last Wednesday and asked, is there any progress in identifying who this individual was? To which you replied, you were away. Speak to Reverend Kate. I spoke to Reverend Kate. Reverend Kate said she's not aware of any individual. You'd made reference to people sleeping on the porch. She said that's not happened for a number of years. Now I share a ward with you, and you say you're helping a homeless person in a public meeting. Has this person turned up? Has something changed since?
Yeah, my problem is I don't know his second name.
Okay, but that's an ongoing thing. So again,
And as you know, Charlie,
no, but
I have physically
outside
taken
of-
homeless people to Coed Pecla to get
Should we
assistance.
take this outside of
no,
the
I
meeting,
just think it's
gentlemen?
important
That
that
would
the
be really
clarity,
good.
because I spoke to you on Friday, and as a fellow ward member, I'd appreciate it if you let me know if there was an ongoing issue, because I've tried to help and I'm not aware of an issue. I just think we need to be very mindful what we say in public meetings.
So if we could, if you two could speak with the relevant officers outside of here. Thank you.
Just to come back on
Very
social
briefly.
care. So
Councillor
what
Gareth, you're
I'm
next.
asking, based on what Amanda's told us, and this is really a question then to Rin or to Jenny or to the cabinet members in social care. One of the issues that is clear to us, and I won't vote for using reserves for anything else, is we have a one-off window to use reserves to tackle significant, what I would call structural, transformational issues, which will enable us to do things differently, particularly in respect of vulnerable people. Are we going to come forward with using that one-off window to try and tackle? Because some of these problems are very long-standing. They're not just immediate problems, they're long-standing. Are we going to use one-off reserves to do that?
Thank you. Who's going to take? Cabinet members? Reen? Thank you.
While I appreciate the question, as you can well imagine, there are a lot of issues that we're dealing with at the moment in terms of trying to get ourselves to a position that we can bring proposals forward. So I think it's a little bit early for us to be identifying pots of money for specific things. Let's have the process, and that will bring out the challenges that we face. This is the initial first report that you've had explaining what the budget position at the moment is. We haven't even got the settlement through as yet. So I'd appreciate in those circumstances relevant questions to ask. I'm not denying that at all, but this is a process. So we will bring the proposals forward, and you by all means you can raise those structural issues that you want to raise, and whether there's potential for investment in different areas to bridge, as Amanda mentioned. But some of these issues will be longer term changes. Clearly, you can't bring certain things overnight, not even over a 12-month period. And also they have to be evidenced. All these processes have to be evidence-led. And therefore, the working group that Councillor Julie mentioned, that will have to look at all the evidence, every single part of that, in order to find the solution that we require, certainly through our schools, but also in terms of social care. You know, they are undertaking a considerable amount of work at the moment to try and bring proposals forward. So I'd ask that we do that.
Thank you very much, Reen. We now move on to, we've got Councillors Gareth, Harry, David and Mike. And I don't know if anyone online, this is for everyone to take part in. So we'll go with Councillor Gareth next, please. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, as far as I'm concerned, we have to actually take absolutely all the tough decisions that we need to take to avoid that section 114. Otherwise, it's going to be taken out of our hands, and those tough decisions and even tougher decisions are going to be made anyway. I'm really comfortable with Amanda being pessimistic rather than optimistic, because, you know, if you've been over pessimistic, we need to put funds into reserves. If you've been over optimistic, we simply haven't got the resilience to cope with any optimism. So we have to be pessimistic when we actually tackle this. I think we need to be realistic. The only way we can actually hit these numbers are either through job cuts or efficiencies. And I guess that the easy efficiencies have already been done. We've covered that umpteen times over the years, and we've touched on this a few times, is that we need structural changes and transformation. And again, I think that is actually going to take more than 12 months. We need that long-term view. So my question is, you know, have we got any plans to actually build in a medium-term financial plan into this, so that we're not looking at it on an annual basis? We've actually got a plan over 2-3 years, which I understand other councils are doing, and build that in to an actual long-term asset management strategy, where we've actually looking to generate the cash to actually pay for some of these transformations and things, so that everything is integrated. And I'm not saying long term so that we can actually delay making decisions, but, you know, to allow services and the public to understand where we're going and that direction of travel. And my final question is on the business cases, the 15 million of business cases. Is it possible to split out the ones that we've got no choice in, as you said, Amanda, whether they're indexations, and to the ones where we actually have got a choice, and put some figures on that at some stage, so that we actually know where the options are? Thank you.
Councillor Charlie, did you want to come back on that in terms of the medium-term financial plan and asset management strategy?
Amanda's going to take that one.
Oh, okay, thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Yeah, I think absolutely. We have to have a program of activity, don't we? As you say, of transformation or you know, modernization, whatever you want to call it, which gives us, as you say, not just a plan that tackles the immediacy of setting a 24-25 budget, but actually sets in motion the activity required to address the years after. So that is actively being considered at the moment, and certainly services in terms of the proposals coming forward, you know, have a range of options which have that sort of multi-year facet to it. You know, I think if I'm being brutally honest, we're probably not as advanced in that space as I would like to be, and I think if truth be told, it's because of the priority of trying to set next year's budget effectively, in terms of getting to that balanced position. You mentioned asset management again. We've taken some steps in recent days to start that journey in a more active way, because again, I think, as you say, twofold really, with assets, empty buildings and assets we no longer need. One, the need to generate revenue from them in order to, as you say, fund other things, be it capital or transformation, and actually to eradicate from the budget running costs which we don't need to incur, which we're wasting effectively, if you want to put it in crude terms, if we're paying for property which is sitting empty. What I would say that with that though is that again also needs decisions and preparedness to release assets when they are actually no longer in use or needed, and not being kept for future just in case sort of thing. So I think that again it's an area that needs some clarity of decisions on that. There was one other point I was going to make, and it's gone out of my head suddenly, so apologies. What was your last question, Councillor Gareth? Or what was your last point?
My last point was the business cases of 15 million. You touched on a few of them, whether the indexation, I'd find it really helpful if they could be split out into, is it really a business case if we've got no choice but to pay the pay increases or pay the indexation? Let's split them into ones where we have got a choice and one where we haven't got a choice.
Absolutely. And with that very fact in mind, we went through them in detail at the senior leadership team earlier in the week, and the schedule that's been presented to the budget working group alongside the business cases in fact does that very thing. It splits them into those that are essential because it's pay effectively, or inflation, those that are there to mitigate or manage a risk, and therefore that's something we can address or not, as the case may be. And then I think there was another category, which is some that are looking to potentially replace grant funding falling out. So there's a view on that, and then a couple of others. So yes, in the budget working group tomorrow, we've got that categorisation for you.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Councillor Gareth. Right, we're going Councillor Harry, then David, then Mike. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. But I'll start by saying I actually agree with some points made by the Cabinet and the Chief Exec, which I'm sure will perhaps be welcome. Look, first of all, I entirely take on board the point the Chief Exec has made in respect of this is an initial report at the beginning of a process. The Scrutiny Committee has been asked to look at the report. Cabinet will then go on to consider it further. The majority of the Cabinet are here and will have heard today's debate. So I'm happy to propose that this committee note the report and its contents. Just picking up the comments made by our two social care Cabinet members, very much agree with the points made about it being important that impacts on services are communicated to us and are communicated to the public. I think that's really important. I think there is actually a degree of sympathy out there as far as the public are concerned around the council's financial position. What I would say is at the last meeting of this committee, I raised a point around information around impacts on services being shared with this committee. I was told that was naive to ask for. So put bluntly, I really welcome a change in tone from the Cabinet today, and I hope that continues. The final point I wanted to come to, and this is a question perhaps for Amanda, assuming she's more on the ball with a calculator, but anyone else that wants to come in, please do. I note table 6 in the appendix and the point that if we were a 5% council tax increase, that would be a 9.4, or that would perhaps require a 9.4% budget reduction across all services. I think we know in the past that usually there's an additional level of protection for both schools and social care. It's normally around 5%. So what I wondered is, has anyone done the maths to work out what that percentage budget reduction for all of our services would be if schools and social care budgets were reduced by only 5%? Was it too early to ask that question? I just thought I'd raise it in terms of having an indicative steer as to where we're going. But there we go. One question, 1 point, and a proposal that we note. the contents of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. I have my eye firmly on the clock, so thank you for that. Amanda,
Thank you for the question, Councillor Harry. I must confess I haven't got my calculator with me, so unfortunately I won't just bang out the number here and now. But what I would say just in overall terms, and I've referenced this in previous reports, education and social care are 80% of our budget. Therefore, if you're protecting 80% of our budget with only a 5% cut, then that's a significant amount that's got to fall on the remaining 20%. So I don't have the calcs, but I would imagine in rough terms you would be talking about the other services being up to 15 to 20%, if not more.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. Thank you, Amanda. Councillor David next, please.
Sure. Yeah, I've got some comments and suggestions. Looking at council tax last year, it was the highest in Wales, and I think projections are looking that we'll be given looking at 5, 7 or whatever into 10%. I think, you know, we have to listen to residents. Residents obviously, and I welcome what Charlie said about council tax being a regressive tax. It does hit the poorest hardest. We have to be very careful about any big increases above inflation in council tax. I think we need to look at non-statutory services in a way that we haven't done. I remember last year when Mike was doing the finance job, he said he was going to work every day and look for next year's budget, and we were going to look. But what we found £600,000 spent on a rugby pitch, £250,000 spent on consultants to tell us how to move this. I don't know what it's about. It was how to move this council chamber over to Clwyd Pecler. I think we've got to cut out those and they're my suggestions, to cut out these non-statutory services. School transport. We've actually, instead of actually looking at those non-statutory services, we're actually in a year's consultation period. During that period, it's gone up. We're actually spending more on home to school transport during that consultation period. A lot of that is non-statutory services. We need to look at cutting non-statutory home to school transport. On social services, we need to protect the vulnerable. That's where we really do not want to make cuts that are actually going to help, that are actually going to affect the vulnerable. So, you know, really, that is the area for me that I would expect that, you know, that we do need to protect. And I think we do need to listen a lot more. And I think this cabinet needs to listen a lot more to councillors, to residents, because what people want, they want good public services. They don't want all these things that are very nice that we're funding, but we really can't afford. We've got to stick to statutory services, and we've got to try and keep that council tax increase as low as we possibly can, because that's really going to hurt people in my ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. Councillor Charlie, come back, then we're going to Councillor.
I think listening goes two ways, Councillor David. You know, obviously we've discussed the rugby pitch. It'll save us 40k a year. It'll increase community usage. That's a good thing to do. Saving money and providing services. Councillor Gareth pointed out we could have maybe handled the process better, but said that's actually a very good idea. Our statutory service to school, that consultation is ongoing. We have to do consultation. There's not a choice element there. We can't just say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to bother. You're very passionate about social care. I know your background in social care. You voted on many times for increases to social care. They are expensive, and then that affects our council tax, and then you will take which is your choice not to vote for a council tax rise. So you're conflating two things. The 200k we spend here is necessary. We need to create a clean title for this building, or this building will be derelict. No one will buy it. No one will be interested in it. That would be the wrong thing to do. You sometimes have to spend money to save money and spend money to make money. We cannot just be in a situation where we completely take our eye off the ball and we just continue to spend and spend and spend. We have to look at new ways of working. And new ways of working, as Councillor Paul says, sometimes you have to invest money for that new way of working to go ahead. So it's very easy to trot out the same things over and over again, but that's not going to fix the problem that we're facing. And I would really ask members to be sensible about stuff here, because we've had 3 meetings about the rugby pitch, which saves us 40 grand a year. And if you're going to keep dragging that up, but what does that actually solve? And how helpful is that to our residents?
Thank you, Councillor. Just briefly.
I mean, basically, it's a spend to save policy, but only if you actually spend money to start with. We could do without it. We don't need to even have it to start with. And that's the point. And that's the point that's never taken back. On consultants, there should be enough expertise in this council to be able to move things from one building to another or whatever without actually spending money on consultants. I don't agree with that. I think we should use the expertise of the management team in this council to do it. We should not be spending money on consultants when we're talking about council tax increases of 10%. On social services, yeah, I'm passionate about social services, but I'm a realist as well, to try and protect the vulnerable. That's what I'm saying. You know, I'm not saying we can't make any cuts in social services, but I'm not happy about some of the cuts. I haven't got time to go into detail here, but I'm not happy about the things that have been cut in social services. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. Councillor Mike is next. Councillor Mike.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I thank Councillor David Carr for what he said regarding looking at opportunities to cut the budgets or any ideas. And I wondered if he could perhaps put that in writing to perhaps Charlie, the leader, so that could be looked at instead of just saying it here today. And I'm not really interested in an email to everyone. So if you could just email that to the leader, and then perhaps Charlie could take that forward. So that would be good. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Amanda for bringing this report, as grim as it is, to the table at the most earliest opportunity. I just want to say a few words. I won't sort of drum this out. You know, we all became councillors to represent our residents and to make a difference in the wards that we represent. We never, and I certainly speak for myself, entered local government to cut budgets like we have done over the last decade. You know, we've had to remove £80 million from our budget. Could you imagine if we were sat here with that £80 million now? Wouldn't it be a lot easier? Let's face it, yet again, it's a very depressing report that faces us for the future. I believe the absolute future of Conwy County Borough Council. And I believe these reports are probably going to be read and discussed up and down the country nationwide. We're not alone here. I read today in the press that Scotland now, the councils are saying that they're underfunded by millions and millions of pounds. I think we all need to work together to face this difficult, unthinkable situation that faces us. We all need to work together. These cuts must be driven by Cabinet, scrutinised by us, and on the whole, supported through the due process. I think our residents need that, and also I agree we need to communicate with our residents regarding this difficult situation that we're in. And I don't think it's good just to sit on your hands and say no to increasing council tax and charges, and no to cutting I've lost the word at the moment, cutting services or being a little bit taking money out of the budgets. I apologise for that. So it's no good. We have to be accountable as councillors to the people that have represented us, to the situation we face. As I say, you can't say we're not increasing charges and we're not cutting services, because let's face it, Chair, if we do that, if we take that mentality, I put a punt on that we will go bankrupt. What will happen if we go bankrupt? We've talked about a Section 114. A Section 114, let me tell you now, comes with no extra money. What will happen is Welsh Government civil servants will come to Conwy and they will savagely cut our budget just to make it balance. And the people that should be looking at the budget is us, because we know the consequences of making cuts to the budgets, and we know what that means to our people. So I think we all need to step up to the plate and be accountable for the budget and the dire situation that we face in Conwy. So I just wanted to say that. I apologise, I lost my words along the way there, but it's about being accountable. You have to increase charges. You have to be efficient, is the word I was looking for, Chair. And obviously, you have to, legally balance the budget, and that we need to do with all as one a council. 55 of us, I think there is there? And the bottom line is, I agree with Councillor Carr, and I agree with what's been said. We need to start talking to our residents, communicate with the residents regarding the dire situation we face. Thank you, Chair. No question here, but I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Councillor Mike. Got Councillor Anne online and Councillor Gromley in the room. Thanks. Councillor Anne.
Hi, Chair. No, I think, I mean, I don't want to take up any time really. I think I agree particularly with the whole piece about we need some structural change and a transformation plan and a transformation budget, actually. And it probably, within these difficult circumstances, we've actually got to have that money available within the budget in the coming year, because we can't keep going on as we are. But in terms of the comms piece, have we got a comms and engagement plan? Because I don't sense that we do. And I'd really ask that one be brought forward to members so that all the information that Amanda shared, and actually the contextual stuff that Charlie shared, I think our residents, we owe it to them to actually let them understand that what we face, but also nobody's mentioned particularly strongly that we also, in whatever decisions we make going forward, we need to be aware of the current cost of living crisis on our residents, because their income is eroded. They're already having to cut their coat. So if we put on high council tax increases, and I can't see that that's not going to be the direction of travel, that's going to put significant additional burdens with unpalatable consequences for them too. So I just wanted to put on the record that we need to take that into account in our deliberations. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chard, did you want to answer the comms before we come to Councillor Gronway, then go to the vote? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with Councillor Allen that we do need to explain the situation better. Be looking at a number of options. It's quite difficult to find one that really fits our circumstances, but I thought the Police and Crime Commissioner one recently was quite interesting, and where there were a range of options and a range of consequences, and showing where that money could be used and what cuts would be made. We are against all hope waiting until the 19th to see what the final settlement figure is, what the real figure, well, we know it'll be the real figure. So we will look to get something out there, and actually, which will explain the situation, which will actually show what those different levels look like, and allow people to make a meaningful choice rather than a sort of binary yes or no. So yeah, it's very much at the forefront of my mind, Anne, but needs a bit more work essentially.
Okay, thanks, Charlie.
Charlie. And you'll be letting us all know when you get the hard word on the 19th then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, last word, Councillor Gronway, and then we've had a proposal from Councillor Harry. So if someone could second after. Oh, you'll second. That's lovely. Councillor Dilwyn, thank you. Brief word, Councillor Gronway.
Yep. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Amanda and to all the members for their comments. I think it's very helpful that we are realising the situation we're in. Just a question, and thanks to Councillor Harry for moving the recommendation. He asked in a previous scrutiny meeting about the effects of some of the in-ear pauses we put on spend, and I can just give those answers to Harry now. As far as ERF, and we had 10% savings last year, we've also had this pause on spend. So the pause on spend will affect that car park maintenance will not be going ahead this year. Reduction in the highway maintenance is ongoing. Delay in undertaking more in-depth drainage is going on. Routine road markings are not being refurbished. Repairs are not being done to meet the threshold. Second cycle wheat spraying is not going ahead. Traffic regulation orders, no new regulations are being processed. New signs and line requests, no new signs and line requests, even though these are very much requested by members. No requests for new street lighting, no purchasing of new additional automatic traffic counters, no ground maintenance, reduction in winter maintenance schedule, for example, hedge cutting back on public rights of way, repairs to stiles, kissing gates. No, where possible, emailing correspondence and not posting. Reducing in printing, staff instructed to use pool cars instead of using their own cars and claiming casual user allowance. Vandalised play equipment not being repaired, not repairing vandalism in toilets, resulting in closures of toilets, and no new bookings for community skips. That is the reality of what we have to do in year savings. So they do come with consequences, as long as members realise that when we go into the budget round, they will come with consequences, and our residents will be holding us to task for that.
Thank you, Councillor Gronway. Did you say cutting back on drainage, on work on drainage? And oh, mic on, please.
That is the reality. We're having to pause on looking at recycle, works through our culverts and all these things which are critical. We've seen the effect of Storm Babette. We will respond wherever we can, and obviously any emergency will be dealt with. But it does mean that essential work has been less than carried out in the way that I would like it. Because certainly I haven't gone into the service to or taken this portfolio to reduce the services that our residents so much value.
We've just had a quick hand up from Councillor Mandy there, very briefly. Councillor Mandy, as we're going to the vote. Thank you.
I will be really quick. Just want to really just come in on what Granway said. Thank Granway. I picked up also on what Cheryl's just said, that you're going to be cutting back on drainage works and the culverts in the recent flooding. Wouldn't it be better to cut back on investing and buying more recycling trucks and stuff like that, all the money spending on the trucks and all that at the moment, and actually putting it into the drainage, to make sure that they're not being blocked.
Happy to come back on that.
Thank you.
Happy to come back on that. The vehicles we have for recycling and bin collection and everything else, these are some of them are 10 to 15 years old. They are becoming dangerous. And the service of if you didn't empty the bins and the recycling, I'm sure there'd be a massive uproar.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure that's going to be explored further, Councillor Mandy, but I agree with you on that, as we're just following Storm Babette. Last word, Councillor Sharon, and then we really are going to the vote. Go on.
It's a question for Amanda, really. In a previous meeting, we talked about money that had been ring-fenced for projects that hadn't happened, and underspends on projects that perhaps had happened, that the underspend was being kept within that department. Is there any money, no matter how small? You can tell I'm a housewife used to trying to do these sort of budgets. Is there any money that, however small, is likely to come in to offset any of our deficit for this year? That's my first question. So I'll let you answer that one first.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so in terms of the current financial year, all heads of service, as I say, and all budget holders have been previously asked, back in August actually, but it's been re-emphasised now, the need to really minimise spend as much as possible in the current financial year, and therefore it would be anticipated that any underspending across any budget that happens will come back to the centre. So effectively, to the extent something hasn't gone ahead, and in the past maybe there would have been a decision, or there would have been a request, I haven't spent this, can I carry it forward as part of my earmark reserves, and an approval might have been given. I think in the current financial year that won't be the case. So effectively any underspending that occurs across any budgets will come back into our central balance position. I think the other area that we need to consider, and I think we've discussed it here a couple of times, is where services currently hold certain earmarked reserves. I think although that's been supported through here and through cabinet, that services hold those reserves for specific purposes. I think again that's something that members may want to review in the future, and whether we in fact look to bring some of those earmarked reserves back to the centre to provide us overall resilience, rather than them be used for the purposes they're currently being held, which may well be perfectly legitimate, laudable things to do, but in the current climate, maybe not absolutely essential. So I think a bit of both in relation to that.
Thank you, Councillor Sharon. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, we've had the proposal from Councillor Harry. It's been seconded by Councillor Dilwyn. If we would all like to show, first of all, in favour of that, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the chamber, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 online. Yeah.
Andy and Anne, Louise.
Yeah. Councillor Frank, you showing, have you got your hand up there? No. Okay, thank you. So is that seven? Seven online. Thank you. Those against, please. No. Those abstaining? No. Okay, that is carried. Thank you, members. And I won't apologise for the length that debate took, because it's extremely important. It's the most important report, isn't it? And it's good that we've given it this much consideration. We now move on to item 8, the job evaluation policy, pages 29 to 45. Councillor Chris Cater is going to present, and Fran Lewis, Head of People and Performance, will present the report. Thank you, Councillor Chris.
Yeah, Borada, it's just morning still, Chair.
Only just.
Yes, job evaluation is a recognised scheme that ensures we follow a fair and objective process to safeguard equal pay for work of equal value. As you know, equality is a cross-cutting theme embedded in everything as a council we do. The scheme is managed corporately within the human resources team, and I'd like to thank Kerry York, our JE analyst and business coordinator at this point. So it has strong collaboration with the recognised trade unions. We've been talking a lot about finances just now. There's no additional resource implications with this. The main resource is staff time to maintain the scheme. So with that, I'll hand over to Fran, who's sitting next to me.
Thanks, Councillor Chris. Well, I can say good afternoon now, can't I? Yeah, just by way of introduction, just to give some context. So the Equality Act 2010 sets out in law that men and women in the same employment performing equal work must receive equal pay unless that can be justified. And the way to do that is through a recognised job evaluation scheme that ensures that we follow a fair and objective process and safeguard equal pay for work of equal value within the authority. The authority uses the Greater London Provincial Scheme for all staff who are contracted under the NJC, often called single status or green book. And we have a separate scheme for chief officers where we use Hayes. As Councillor Chris said, the People and Performance Service have undertaken a thorough review of all aspects of the job evaluation scheme. The review has included all staff having refresher training, equal pay and discrimination refresher training, positive action training, and the development of a new JE system to record post scores, and also completed another year of our equal pay audit that we'll be bringing through democracy in the new year. As a result of this thorough review, we have updated the job evaluation policy and supporting operational procedures. We've created flowcharts, we've created FAQs, and we've made it really clear what roles and responsibilities each member of staff and trade union partner has. So what I'm presenting today for democratic approval is the job evaluation policy. All operational documents have already been consulted upon with our trade union colleagues and presented to the senior management team for their approval. Just to give you some background, job evaluation is not new. It was approved back in 2004, and the initial work, huge amount of work to undertake job evaluation was completed in 2010. And that's when the new terms and conditions of employment for all staff groups under NJC were completed. A new pay and grade structure and harmonised conditions of service were also successfully introduced. And since that time, the authority has been maintaining the scheme, as Amanda explained in her report earlier, making necessary amendments where required, such as in light of national minimum wage. I can say at this moment in time, there are no equal pay claims within the authority. There historically were settled back in 2017. We are open and transparent about our pay. I present to Democracy every March a pay policy statement that makes it clear what officers are paid. But I would like to note that local government pay is not negotiated at a council level. Pay for chief execs, chief officers, our heads of service, and staff employed in single status is negotiated nationally by the National Employers for Local Government Services in conjunction with recognised trade unions, Unison, GMB, and Unite. Having a sound job evaluation scheme is really key. The risk of equal pay claim is low, but it's really important that we are vigilant. Members will be aware of cases in the press at the moment in relation to Birmingham, Fife, and also Sheffield. And so it's not just about having the scheme, it's making sure that we are strict in our approach and how we apply it. And I'm delighted that we have a really good working relationship with our trade union colleagues in undertaking that task. I won't go into detail about the actual policy. It's clear there in terms of it gives you an oversight as to how it's run. We have trained staff and trade union reps who work as a panel who score each and every role. That should make that clear. It's about the role, not about the person, against 11 factors. And that creates a score for that role. So JE is not about salary, but we apply that score to our pay scale rank order, and that makes sure that we have equal pay for work of equal value. In reviewing the policy, we have proposed some changes that I just wanted to highlight. We've removed the right of the chair to have a vote if there isn't a unanimous decision. We've included a process of sore thumbing for each panel as a quality control, and we have removed the second stage appeal, bringing the policy in line with our other procedures of one stage of appeal. We've also proposed a time limit of 2 months in which staff can consider whether they wish to appeal the job evaluation score. And perhaps most importantly is that we've really worked on the forms to make sure that they're really clear to staff about what kind of information is required in order to submit a job evaluation review. And we're hopeful that this will therefore work in conjunction with our recruitment project, making it clear what information is required for a job evaluation scheme, but move away from historical practice of writing job descriptions for job evaluation. We're clear to staff that the job description should be succinct to tell applicants what is required of a job. The detail needs to be submitted for job evaluation, and we need to just break that trend of overly burdensome job descriptions that don't help our recruitment process. So that just gives you some oversight as to what is included within the policy, and I'll hand over for questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Fran, and thank you for your patience in waiting through the earlier reports. Okay, who would like? Oh, Councillor Dilwyn first.
Can I thank to Councillor Chris and Fran for this report? Very good. But I do have one question here. One thing within evaluating a job, that there isn't a mention about the value and the need for jobs to be bilingual. And I know you'll tell me it comes under knowledge and skills, but personally, I'm not happy yes, it comes from there, but I would like to see that it be noted as one of that there are jobs that need that. Not every job does. I appreciate that, but if it isn't mentioned in the report, I do feel it's harder to push it forward when it comes to appointing people where Welsh is essential, in my opinion, if that's clear.
Councillor Dilwyn. Fran?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dilwyn. Yeah, that's why I was trying to stress about separating the job description from JE. We follow a recognised scheme that quite a lot of local authorities follow. And language is not one of the 11 factors, but that's a separate scoring process for every role, and doesn't impinge on a decision through the Welsh language scheme as to whether a job should be Welsh essential or Welsh desirable.
I understand what you're saying and I respect that. I'm not 100% convinced by that. I do think in certain roles it's more important than others. I think there should be something in job evaluation as well as when you said as well. Yeah, well, we know what my feeling is, and I certainly want to see a mention of bilingualism somewhere in the report that refers to job evaluation.
Thank you, Councillor Dilwyn. Right, next, Councillor Gareth. Thank you.
Only just eisiau dweud
I just want to say that we accept the report as it is in front of us.
we accept the recommendation, Cheryl.
Dear Councillor Gareth. Okay, so we've had, Councillor David, have you got a question there, please?
Yeah, just a brief question about the wider workforce that we talk about, particularly domiciliary care workforce, and how equal pay do we have in the contracts that we have with the people that actually, or the companies that actually supply these services, that they have equal pay with the council. So just for an example, say somebody in the council's reablement team that's providing domiciliary care services, would the pay conditions be equal to what, say, an agency that we employ? So it's like in the wider workforce. Do we put that in the contracts to try and make sure that the services that we provide by the private sector, they have the same sort of equal pay that we have in the council?
Yeah, I mean, the job evaluation scheme is for staff employed by the authority, but in terms of agency, yes, we do require that they have, we allocate to a grade so that those agency staff are having equal pay to staff who are employed. In terms of domiciliary care, that's obviously through contracts, and I'm less familiar with that area, I'm afraid, to talk about that. And I don't know, I can see Tesney's online. I don't know whether she can help at all, but otherwise I have to get back to you in terms of that query.
But maybe we could come back outside of here as because of Kat has left, Kat and Jenny have left as well. So so if we could take that outside. Thank you, Councillor David. We've next got Councillor Stephen online.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank Fran and Chris for the report today. I just have a question in relation to, they mentioned that the appeal process will reduce from 3 months to 2 months. And I'm just wondering, how does that conflict with the employment law statutory obligation of grievances, which is 3 months minus 1 day? Are you suggesting that the grievance procedure is going to be overlooked in relation to appeals?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Stephen. I didn't say it was reduced from 3 months to 2 months. We've just introduced a time frame for appealing a decision of the panel. In the past, it was left open-ended, and we found that made it very difficult in terms of organising panels and for managing particular honorariums and temporary arrangements. Appealing a job evaluation result isn't the same as a grievance, and therefore we're just falling in line with other procedures for job evaluation used elsewhere.
Okay, so obviously they will still have that right to lodge agreements with 3 months minus 1 day. And I'd also like to comment, you mentioned the 3 unions, Unison, Unite and GMB, and I'm just wondering, do you have any correspondence or meetings with the NEU as well?
Yes, there are regular trade union meetings with education reps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen. Got just a quick point from Councillor Dilwyn to come back in before we go to the vote.
Yes, just I don't feel I've had an answer to the question. Yeah, I don't feel I've had an answer to the question. So, there is not going to be any mention of bilingualism in the report, is there?
I can certainly make reference to it in the policy, in that bilingualism is really important to the authority, but it isn't a factor within the scheme that we follow. It's not one of the 11 factors.
Would that be the case in all local authorities in Wales?
It would be the case of those who are following the GLPC scheme, yes, but I'm not aware of another scheme where it is a factor.
Right. I'm just finding it difficult to support it if there was no reference to the importance of bilingualism in some jobs within this policy.
Well, as I said, the Welsh language status is separate anyway. It doesn't impinge on it in that every job that comes through looks at the demographic profile of the team as to whether it needs.
I haven't suggested every job, just the ones that certain jobs would be. If I've got it wrong, that's fine. That's fine.
I'll certainly make reference within the policy about the importance of Welsh language, Councillor Dilwyn. But unless we're going to change the JE scheme that we use, it's not a factor. It's not one of the 11 factors.
Thank you, Fran. Oh, Councillor Stephen, quickly.
Yeah, thank you again. Councillor Dilwyn makes a valid point there, and I'm just a bit concerned that the equalities lack the protected characteristics. One of them is race. Although language is potentially not one of the characteristics, we have to take into consideration race, which may be an incidental reference in not suggesting what the Councillor Dilwyn has asked for, in not including that within those factors. Thank you. That was it. Probably more of a statement than a question, but I'd like some clarity on that, please.
Yeah, I think what we need to bear in mind, this is for consultation, isn't it? But we need to be careful because this is an established scheme. So yes, we can bring comparators, we can show you what others are doing, but it is an established, recognized scheme. So I don't want us to get off track on that, and as Councillor Dillon has said himself, there are separate issues around how we allocate Welsh Essential compared to job evaluation. Those are separate things, aren't they? So yes, the way we allocate is within our gift as to what's Welsh Essential, what isn't. But the scheme is a recognised, followed scheme. So I'd be very careful about making assumptions around certain elements of it. And we can by all means we can have a look at comparators and the questions that you ask, Councillor Dilwyn, around are there other authorities who do something different, but that would mean us having to change the whole scheme. And yeah.
My concern, my concern is, if I can come back, unless it's included here, it makes it more difficult, like I found, for people like myself who put importance on this, to make a valid case for Welsh Essential when it comes to jobs being put out to, we're employing people.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. I think Councillor Chris wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I just thank you, Chair, for letting me come back in. I just worry that if we alter the scheme, we would have to reevaluate every job, and that would be a massive task and would set us, well, back to square one, really, wouldn't it? We have the job descriptions, and some of the job descriptions are Welsh Essential, Welsh Desirable, or don't make reference. But I mean, Councillor Dilwyn's quite right. We are a bilingual authority, and we've got to emphasise that at every point. But I would suggest we don't change this policy at this point. And I think we can rely on the job description process, Councillor Dilwyn.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much, Councillor Chris. Okay, well, members have had a proposal from Councillor Gareth. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sharon, thank you. If everyone would like to show in favour, please. 2, 3, 4 in the chamber. And how many online? 2, 3. Keep moving round. 7. Is Councillor Tristan there? He's left. All right, because he hasn't voted today. So okay. So 7. Anybody against? Okay, Councillor Dillon. 1 against. Any abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you. Maybe if we could pop in the chair's notes for next week to for the next meeting, maybe people we do ask members if they're going to leave, don't we, to let member services know, so we know where we are with voting. I don't think Councillor was voting any of the reports. Okay, thank you for that. We now go on to Councillor Chris again. Standby policy, pages 46 to 66, and supported by I think Tracy's you're going to do it. Okay, thank you, Fran.
Okay, diolch yn fawr unwaith eto, Cadeirydd. Yes, so standby refers to payment made to staff agreeing to be on a standby rota. So if there is an emergency, they can be called upon at short notice to respond to that emergency. Chair, this is another policy that needs to be consistently fair and show our commitment set out in our people strategy to reinforce parity in the workplace and our Team Conway approach. We want the staff of Conway to participate in hours work in the first place, and different teams working alongside others should not have different arrangements. Recent climatic emergency events, Storm Babette's already been mentioned today, have highlighted how many of our residents and businesses rely on Conway staff to work outside their normal working schedules, including at some very unsociable hours. The resource implications, the majority of the cost will fall to ERF, but hopefully we will be able to recover a substantial amount through external sources. So with that, I hand over to Fran. I'd like to thank Tracy Pardo, our HR Service Manager, for Employment and Equality at this point, but I hand over to Fran. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chris.
Thank you. Yes, and I'll do my best to try and present this on Tracy's behalf. So as Councillor Chris has said, we need to have fairness, and it follows on really from my previous report in terms of equal pay, that we need to have fairness and parity when we are asking staff to undertake standby. And there are times when it's necessary to have staff on standby to make sure that we are able to respond to emergency situations outside normal working hours. Another example of the great work this authority does, we're there to support communities at any hour, not just office hours. So this does mean that it's necessary to call on staff to work outside their normal working pattern, and that's often unsociable times and often at short notice. And we need to have a programme so that we have suitably trained workforce on standby who know that they need to be ready to help if needed. And that they need to be contactable at all times and be within a reasonable distance of their workplace. Conwy currently has a variety of different standby arrangements in place to ensure that we have cover for emergencies, and that's particularly important this time of year. But the work that Tracy has done is to establish that these arrangements are inconsistent in how they are applied and what is paid, and therefore this policy is really needed to ensure that there is a fair payment rate. In considering an appropriate rate for standby, the authority has looked at current rates paid across services within Conwy and also compared ourselves to other local authorities in Wales, and is proposing to a session rate of £25 per session in Conwy. It should be stressed, particularly in light of Amanda's report into our finances, that this still places us at the lower end of middle when compared to other North Wales local authorities. And this is still even a fair bit lower than other local authorities elsewhere in Wales. So we have taken in consideration the current financial situation, but we do also need to make sure that we are fair in our way of rewarding our staff for them to agreeing to undertake out of hours work. And this is increasingly more important with the impact of global warming and our weather patterns. The proposal will see a net cost increase of £105,000, but it should be noted that some of these costs will be offset through external funding that we can claim back. There are 63 standby shifts across the authority, and the majority of those, 53 of them, are undertaken by staff in ERF. The remainder are mainly, but not exclusively, within social care. So if members are happy, I'll propose that consideration is given to this new standby policy, the understanding that it creates parity across the authority and ensures that we give a fair payment rate and have the business continuity that we very much need outside our office hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. That's great. Members, questions? To Councillor Paul, Councillor David, thank you.
Just a question. We have 63 standby shifts. Are we able to fill these shifts with volunteers?
Yes, they're 63 different arrangements, not members of staff, but yeah, they are currently in place. It's just we need to get the parity of that standby payment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Councillor David next.
Thank you. It's a related question about 7-day working, and is there any moves towards that, particularly in social services? When I was working in social care as a manager, I did find it very frustrating that sometimes you couldn't speak to anyone until the Monday morning, and things happened over the weekend, and really nobody available. And I brought this up a lifetime ago. Why haven't we got 7-day working? And I know that the health board are very much in favour of 7-day working, particularly in social services. Is there any moves towards that? Not just in social care, but in other areas as well, obviously.
The standby policy ensures that we have 7-day working for emergencies. So there are arrangements, particularly in social care, through the emergency duty team. But it's not my place to answer in terms of any discussions around a general office 7-day working.
Thank you, Fran. Content, Councillor David.
I think, yeah, it's for emergencies, but I think 7-day working would benefit in certain areas of the council. I think something we should look at. Obviously, I'm just asking, making an observation at the moment, but I think that's something we should definitely be looking at in certain areas, that 7-day working would be really good to improve services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got no further questions. Could I have a proposer and a seconder for this, please? Lovely. Propose, yes. I couldn't, they were a dead heat there, Councillors Gareth and Paul. So share the love there, gentlemen. And so if everyone would like to show in support of this, please. Thank you. That's got those number 6 online as well. Lovely. Thank you. Anyone against? No. Any abstentions? No. Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much, Fran. We now come to item 8C, consultation on draft strategic equality plan 2024-2028, pages 67 to 369. Again, it's the double act, Councillor Chris and Fran. Councillor Chris, thank you.
Yes, we've also got to my right, Josh Cripps, our HR and Equality Officer here as well. So anyway, to comply with the Equality Act 2010 and the Statutory Duties Wales Act 2011 regulations, we need to agree and publish our latest updated equality plan by the 31st of March next year, so that it's a clear opportunity to reinforce our commitment to being an organisation that actively improves the lives of people with the 9 protected characteristics. And the plan, Chair, will tackle discrimination, promoting equality and diversity throughout. I'm sure we will all agree that we want a more inclusive society, and this is a large, clear, comprehensive document, and it has an ambitious action plan which sets out our working goals over the 4-year period. It is full of specifics, and I want to thank the HR team for the substantial work that's gone into this, but also point out that compilation has been agreed service-wide, and we will have an annual checkup alongside our corporate plan review. The resource implications, well, the actions will be taken within existing budgets. There's no new Welsh Government funding, unfortunately. I've spoken to the Minister about this, but there isn't any new funding. There is a reserve allocated for funding specific training, though. So I'll hand over to 2 officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chris.
Thank you. Yes, and I'd also like to extend my thanks to Tracy and Josh for their hard work in pulling this together. I know how much work goes into writing a strategic plan. Yes, as Councillor Chris said, what we're presenting today are the equality objectives and the strategic equality plan proposed for 24 to 28. And there are a number of appendices within the committee pack today. The one I perhaps draw your attention to is the very last one, which is the draft summary SEP. And that is our way of making sure this very comprehensive strategy can be presented in an accessible way for the public and for staff in order that they can understand and actively engage in the consultation. So this is very much about our compliance with legislation, but what we really want to stress is that regardless of the law, our strategic equality plan aims to publicly state our commitment and drive to be an organisation that actively seeks to improve the lives of people with protected characteristics. And you'll see from the report that the objectives within the strategic equality plan very much align to the corporate plan. We will be reflecting on the review of how Wales is performing in terms of equality and human rights, and the publication of the EHRC Is Wales Fairer 2023. The preliminary evidence from this work suggests that improvements have not yet moved significantly in the right direction. There are some key influences within the new SEP. So whilst our outcomes and high-level objectives stay the same, the new SEP has reflected on the pandemic, the cost of living crisis, and also, very importantly, the publication of the Welsh Government action plans, such as the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan, the LGBTQ+ Action Plan, and the Anticipated Disability Rights Action Plan. As Councillor Chris said, these don't come with additional resources, and therefore we need a collective corporate-wide approach to supporting this very important agenda. And I'm keen that we don't see this as a strategy for HR. It's a strategy for the whole authority to own and embed. So the report goes on to explain the engagement that's been undertaken between June and September in order to reflect on the previous SEP and ascertain if those objectives are still relevant. We've also undertaken specific pieces of work such as around recruitment and diversity in recruitment. And we have invited feedback from members of staff as well. That is definitely an area for improvement that we need to build on in this next phase of consultation. So bearing in mind the time, I was, Chair, going to just run through each of the objectives, but I think if it's okay with you, I'll work on the basis that members have had the opportunity to read the draft and open it up for questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Fran. Yes, well, comes under the same as safeguarding, doesn't it? Everyone's business. It's absolutely right that this is a whole authority thing. And thank you also for catching up on the time so marvellously. I'm deeply indebted, as we have chairs and vice chairs in a bit. So, right, opens up. Start with Councillor Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for their work on this. It's very positive. I suppose the thing that still worries me most is when a person reports or alleges they've been discriminated against in whatever aspect. Obviously, the key thing is that is logged, and then there is a clear process. Not only a clear process, but that process is audited. And in terms of a policy point of view, I appreciate that's an operational thing, but as a policy thing, there is a clear report back to us on how many allegations, reports have taken place in a 12-month period, and how they've been dealt with, satisfactorily or unsatisfactorily. And my reading of these documents is, it may be my reading of it, I take it, but I'm still not fully assured that that audit system is robust, and robust, as you say, has to be robust across all departments, and being sort of, well, I would say monitored by all strategic directors, so that in their department they could be confident if somebody alleges they've been discriminated against, there is that it will be dealt with seriously and appropriately and proportionately through the system.
Yeah, absolutely. We have, as I think I've explained to you before, Councillor Paul, that it depending on the circumstance, then we have policies to deal with any alleged discrimination. So if it's a complaint about how a service was delivered, we've got the complaints procedure, which is audited, presented to Democracy as an annual report. If it's an allegation against a member of staff, then we have a harassment policy that we can follow, and if that's upheld, that filters through to our disciplinary policy. Obviously, there's an element of confidentiality within that, so we don't report back on the specific findings, but we do undertake and present an annual employment monitoring report every year, which is presented to Democracy. That reports on formal investigations. Our procedures do allow for informal discussions and mediation. So if those concerns can be addressed at an informal level, then they don't get recorded within the employment monitoring report. But that both reports are presented to Democracy every year.
Content, Councillor Paul. Thank you, Fran. Councillor Gareth.
Thank you. Following, earlier comments earlier in the meeting when we're going to have to make tough decisions, I've got real concerns that we won't have the resources to do excellent and comprehensive reports like this in the future. And we certainly won't have the resources to put into actually following them through. I think it's going to be a case of we're going to be equally unfair to everybody. But nevertheless, I'd like to propose that we accept recommendation 2.2, that we accept the draft and move it forward to public consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Gareth. That's very helpful. We've got Councillor Stephen online and Councillor David in the room. Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. There's a question to Fran in relation to mediation. I'm just wondering, is there a time limit on potential mediation before there's any disciplinary action taken in relation to staff making the complaints? Because I'm mindful of a recent case in which the mediation dragged on for almost 8 months, which eventually resulted in that member of the staff leaving. So is there a time limit on there, and how robust is that mediation?
No, it's all on a case-by-case basis, basically, Councillor Stephen. But if and the policy is clear that if the allegations are serious, then mediation may not be appropriate, and then that would move to the next step, which starts with an investigation to assess, is there a case to answer? If it's assessed that there is a case to answer, then it would go to disciplinary, which does have clear timescales for progressing.
Can I just come back, Chair? The mediation, I'm hoping the correct process is in place, because mediation can sometimes have a detrimental effect on the person that's initially made the complaint, and sometimes there's repercussions from the person who may have instigated that initial incident in the first place. So dragging something on for potentially 6 to 9 months, in my opinion, is not the correct way to go about mediation.
Obviously, I can't talk about that specific case.
I'm not asking you to talk about a specific case.
But it is clear within our policy that if the member of staff doesn't wish to go down the mediation route, then they can move straight to the formal process.
Thank you, Fran.
Thank you, Fran. Councillor David.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. It's very good read, and I hope we continue to get reports like that. I did actually email over to Fran an ITV report that actually said that Wales has the highest number of LGBT people rather than the other nations, and also it's particularly high among young a lot higher in young people than the figures that we normally use. I just asked Fran to have a look at that report and think about it, and think that when we look at it, well, it's less than 1% of the workforce are LGBT. And we're working on figures. Maybe they come from that sense. I don't know where they come from, but the latest figures, and this ITV report is very interesting. There are a lot more LGBT people, and we need, when we're thinking about equalities, we need to employ more. Okay, thank you, Fran.
Thank you, Councillor David. Councillor Sean and Councillor Dilwyn.
I'm just happy to second the recommendation. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much, Councillor Dilwyn.
It's just a question really along what Councillor Stephen asked. I'm surprised that there is no time scale there. Well, to cut to the chase, really, if there is no time scale, one side or the other can deliberately stall the process by not responding to questions. And if they don't respond, I think there should be somewhere where they respond within so many days, so that whatever case can be dealt with in a reasonable amount of time.
Once a complaint goes to the formal stage, then there is an obligation of on staff to comply with the investigation. So they can't stall in that respect. The mediation stage is just to try and yeah,
which is good.
Yeah.
There we are.
Thank you. Well, we've got no more. We've had a proposer, we've had a seconder. If everyone would like to show in support of this excellent report. In the room and online, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 online. Anyone against? Anyone abstain? Oh, Councillor Chris, sorry, was that you against?
Yeah, I was just grabbing something in my hand back to cut the screen.
No worries. Thank you very much. I saw your hand go up. Okay, and no abstention, so that is carried. Thank you very much indeed, members and officers. Really appreciate all your work today. Meeting closed.